All right, peeps. So we are going to talk about the zero product property today. Basically, what you need to know is you need to know how to factor before you do this. So this is what the zero product property is. The first bullet point states that if two numbers multiply to be zero, then one of those numbers has to be zero. Think about it like this. If you have two numbers that multiply to zero, then either A is 0 or B is 0. So let me show you with just some numbers real quick. For example, if you had 3 times 4, there is no way that we can get that to equal 0, right? The only way we could get this to equal 0 is if one of these numbers was 0. Doesn't matter which one. But if we made that 3 a 0 instead, just like that, then 0 times 4 would equal 0. So that's what this says right here. Make sure you have this slide fully copied down. And then we're going to jump right into an example. So I'm going to switch the view real quick so that you can see me working on the actual example. Okay, so I have it here. 0 equals x plus 5 times x minus 3. Again, the zero product property says that if we have two numbers, in this case our numbers are x plus 5 and x minus 3. Because they're in parentheses like this, they are considered one number. So both of these things in the parenthesis is basically just one number. So two numbers multiplied together, they equal 0. That means either this x plus 5 is 0 or this x minus 3 is 0. So the way that we would use the zero product property to actually figure this out is we would take one number at a time. So let me write x plus 5. And then I'm going to write x plus 3 a little bit further out. I can take one number at a time and set it equal to 0. And let's see, what if this was the number that was 0? This whole x plus 5, what if that was 0? So let's figure out what x has to be to make that true. Well, you can see that this is a pretty simple equation with one variable. It's linear, so all we have to do is subtract 5 from both sides, and we get x is 5. Oh, negative 5. And then right here, we're looking at the other number now, this x minus 3. Ignore this. X minus 3. And I can set that equal to 0. So when I do that, again, it's a linear equation, so I can do inverse operations. In this case, we're going to be adding 3 to both sides. This one cancels, and so what we have left on this side is the x equals 3. So here are our two possible answers for x. I'm just going to write those together. X equals negative 5, x equals positive 3, and that's it. So it's a pretty straightforward process. Let me show you another example. You can pause here if you need to copy that down. But here we have 0 equals 2x plus 2 times 3x plus 6. So now we have a number in front of the x in both of these parentheses. So that means one extra step basically, but it's not too bad. Again, the zero product property says that one of these numbers has to be 0, at least one of them. So let's go through the process and work out what either one of those possibilities would be. So I'll take 2x plus 2 equals 0, and then I'll take 3x plus 6 equals 0. So working on one equation at a time. The first thing I want to do is get rid of that plus 2. When you're working through linear equations, or any equation really, and you're trying to solve for the variable, you want to start with addition and subtraction first. So since we're adding here, we would do the inverse, which is subtraction. And then we would leave everything else alone. 2x, we have that equals, we have 0 minus 2, which is negative 2. So now what we can do is we can do the inverse of multiplication here, because that's 2 times x. So we'll divide by 2 on both sides. Cancel that. X equals negative 2 over 2, or negative 1. Simplified. So this is it. Let's move on to the next one. 3x plus 6 equals 0. It's the same exact process that we saw right here on this side, but we're just going to apply that to different numbers. So instead of starting with minus 2 on both sides, we're going to start with minus 6 on both sides, since that's the inverse of plus 6. So we end up with 3x on this side equals negative 6. And so we can finally divide off the coefficient on both sides. That one cancels out to 1. So we have 1x equals negative 6 over 3 simplifies to 2. So our answers are x equals negative 1 or x equals negative 2. So pretty straightforward examples, not too bad. Sometimes though, you are going to get an equation that is not in factored form like this. We're going to get an equation that we're going to have to factor ourselves, like this one, for example. And also what's different about this particular equation is that instead of starting with 0 equals whatever, we have a y this time. So what we have to do is somehow change that y to a 0. We can just change it to a 0. That's all we have to do. Just replace the y with the 0. The reason why we can do that is because if we look at this equation, y equals x squared plus 9x plus 8, what this is saying is there's a y value for every x value here. So if y is 0, we can figure out what the x values have to be. And once we factor this, the reason why we want to change it to a 0 specifically is because when we factor this down, we have a product now, and we can use the zero product property because we'll have, a times b equals 0. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. I'll skip the labeling since we talked about labeling a, b, and c in a previous video. So 8 goes here, 9 goes there. The two numbers that multiply to 8 and add to 9 are 8 and 1. So my factored form would be 0 equals x plus 8 times x plus 1. So now we can use zero product property since we have something times something equals 0. So that means I can separate the two numbers. X plus 8 equals 0 and x plus 1 equals 0. Pretty simple equations here. Just one step to solving both. And if you also notice, whenever we don't have a number in front of the x here, then the answers, the solutions to x, end up being the opposite signs of these two numbers, whatever they are. So that makes things work out pretty nicely for us. But other than that, that's pretty much it. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to smash that like button, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Stay good.